Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Ellen in beautiful and relaxing St. Bart, and today we are chatting with lighting designer Casey Wilkerson on Light Talk.
And this is Zach coming to you from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers
And Sister.
Oh man, welcome to episode 227. You know, today we are halfway through our 5th season. Today we are 85 days from Halloween. Today we are 141 days from Christmas, but most importantly, we are 105 days away from the LDI Circle Bar. So is everyone going to get on a plane and go to Las Vegas? We all there?
Absolutely.
Good. We'll have new swag this year. We'll have new, I think it's lanyards, but I'm not sure.
What happened to the light up balls?
Oh, I forgot. You wanted light up balls. Maybe we can have 2 or 3 different types of swag.
The only way to find out is to come in person.
There you go. You know, and we are also about 30 seconds away from hearing from our latest guest, principal lighting designer at Disney Live Entertainment, Casey Wilkinson.
Hey, everyone. How you guys doing today?
All right.
Great.
Where are you today? What part of the country are you in?
I am based, I live in Los Angeles, but I'm based in Anaheim.
So, Zach, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Casey?
It would be my pleasure. As principal lighting designer for Disney Parks Live Entertainment, Casey leads the team that designs lighting and visual effects for Disney Live Entertainment in California and Hawaii, in addition to providing programming support for Disney projects around the world. His Disney projects include stage shows, concerts, tours, parades, and nighttime spectaculars. Theatrical designs include Lizzie, Wicked Lit, Dogfight, The Secret Garden, and The Who's Tommy, among many others. His theatrical design work has been recognized with awards from the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle, the Los Angeles Stage Alliance, and Stage Scene LA. Casey's work has been published in Live Design, Lighting and Sound America, Stage Directions, and Teaching Theater. He has also led workshops on lighting and theater careers for LDI, Light Fair, International Thespian Festival, Disney Performing Arts, and California Thespians.
Well, there you go. Ellen has our first question.
Okay, Casey, your resume obviously speaks for itself, but how did you first get into lighting design?
Well, I first got into it because I wanted to be in theater, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? So I was curious about audio, I was curious about lighting, I was curious about scenery, and I had a little bit of an art background, a little bit of an architecture background, and my director asked me one day if I would be interested in designing scenery for the school play. And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of architecture. It's kind of artsy. Sure, I can do that. And I did that, and I was sort of bitten by the bug at that point. And I really wanted to continue going down the road to becoming a scenic designer. So much so that by the end of high school, I had made up my mind that that's what I was going to do. And then in, I think it was November, I'd already gone to college. I'd already enrolled and was already attending classes. And I went to see, I'm going to age myself. I went to see the Police on the Synchronicity Tour in 1983. And they were, I believe, the second band to use the first set of VLs after Genesis had used them. And, the band comes on stage, and we're very close. I'm in like the second or third row. And all of my friends are like, oh my God, it's Sting, it's Stewart, and I'm looking at the rig because I don't understand what I'm seeing. And, I went back to college, and I was taking my first lighting class, and I asked the professor, I said, okay, so there were these lights, and they moved. And he said, looks sort of down his glasses at me and says, well, yes, in theater, we call those follow spots. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I know what a follow spot is. There were like 50 of these, and they all moved at the same time. And then they changed color, and the colors were really deep and really saturated, and they were sharp. And he's just looking at me like, I've got a ferret sticking out of my ears or something, because he's like, well, I've never heard of anything like that. And that was really when I learned a couple lessons that day. Number one, you should probably keep up with things that are going on in your industry. And number two, it was at the beginning of something new. And so I was really smitten actually by moving lights. And that's what made me want to go into lighting design, because I was so intrigued.
So, how did you first become involved with doing lighting for Disney? Do you remember the first project that you worked on?
I do, actually. So it began to happen informally. The way that we used to be structured, we would contract lighting designers, and I was titled as a technical director at the time, and I always wanted to be a lighting designer for Disney once I just had graduated and became a lighting designer. So I just started, quote unquote, hiring myself to do the designs for the shows that I was technical director on, which meant twice as much work. So I had an assistant TD that did a lot of the actual technical direction work while I concentrated on doing lighting design. And I did a bunch of like small parties, private parties, special events, that sort of stuff. But the first big gig that I can really remember was for, it was the Global Travel and Tourism Summit, and it was in Washington, D.C. at the National Building Museum. I don't know if you've ever guys have seen this space. It's just incredible. It's this giant volume that goes up, 60 feet or so, these beautiful columns in the building, and just tons of surfaces to light. So that was the first big, sort of big thing that I did for Disney. It was an all Martin rig, and we partnered with Martin to do a story actually in LDI or a live design about that. And it was one of those things that sort of got me addicted to working at a larger scale, because it was such a big gig. And I thought, okay, this is really truly what I want to do. Now I need to figure out how to do it like really for the company instead of just quote unquote on the side.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful space. That's the thing in DC. Whenever there's an event that's at that space, you're like, I don't know. Oh, if it's there, I'm going to go.
Right.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, you've had your hands in a lot of different types of design. Is there a difference between designing for what we think of as a traditional theater versus designing for live entertainment in a theme park environment?
I think so. And I think what it comes down to is the variety of technologies that we're often wanting to use. And maybe this is a little bit more applicable 10 or 15 years ago than now, since Broadway has really embraced a lot of technology, and theater, to the extent that they can afford it, have embraced it. But I've always joked that Disneyland is a venue that, we do sort of theater in a way that kind of uses rock and roll technology in a venue that was never built to do either one of those things. It's true that most of our technology comes from the rock and roll side of things. We were very quick to embrace movers, very quick to embrace LEDs, very quick to embrace video panels. And I think that's probably the biggest difference, is that there is less of a hesitance to embrace whatever is new, not just because it's new or fun or shiny, but just because we're often asked to do things unusual, out of the box, things that have never been done before, or spin things that have been done before into something different. And so we're quite often asked to look outside of the norm to find all of the technologies that will enable us to support whatever the creative is.
Do you spend a lot of time looking at equipment?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's one of the reasons I'm really grateful to be here in LA, because all of the manufacturers have representatives here, and it's the luxury really of not necessarily having to wait until a trade show to go and see new things. You can call people and you can go to showrooms, or they a lot of times will be generous enough to offer to bring down some gear for you to take a look at and experiment with. And I find that is one of the things that we end up doing quite a bit. We try to group everything together. It's like, if you're going to bring something down, then just, bring a truck, bring everything new so we can see, because there are many times that we're looking just to see what's new. And then there are other times that you're looking for something that's really specific. And, it's I need this thing, but I need it to do X, Y, and Z. And so many of the manufacturers are really great about, oh, well, sure, we can try to make it do X, Y, Z.
So let me ask you a question. You don't have clearly, names should not be used in the answer of this question. How many times have you just got a piece of equipment and went, wow, that was a mistake?
You know what? I can probably, it's probably two hands at this point. It's something to make you go, oh, wow, this was, there are two instances I can think of in particular. And one had to do with it was the closest piece of equipment that we could get. And it was not outdoor rated. And we had to put it in an outdoor environment. But there wasn't anybody else that made something this good of this particular type that could work outdoors. And it was the best out of all of them, and it failed spectacularly repeatedly. But that's really our fault, not theirs, right? The other one was we had invested a significant amount of a show budget into a fixture, and about 6 weeks after we took delivery, the manufacturer discontinued that fixture, and we had a really long talk about that.
Yeah. I've always found it interesting, with my work in theater in the video and media server world that, we feel like Broadway is the big time and it's a big important thing. And then I would call up a manufacturer like Dataton who makes, Watch Out. And they would say, we have 8 licenses on Broadway and we have 400 licenses at Disneyland. So when the video guys from Disney call and they ask for a feature, we make it. And so if you really need your feature, you should call one of them and ask them to ask for it. So they have like the bat phone that goes right to the developer.
We are very lucky in that, globally, there is let's call it a financial footprint that invests in a lot of this equipment. And, there are many times, and it goes back to we're often asked to do these weird hybrid types of projects that require thinking differently and require a different approach. And it's like, this piece of equipment would be perfect if it did blah. And then you call the manufacturer, and many, many times they're willing to jump in. A lot of times you get, nah, we're not really interested in making that, because you guys are the only people in the world that have ever asked that question. It's like, okay, I get it, but I had to call. But more often than not, it's, let me think about that. What can we actually do? And then come back to us with solutions, especially as it works out. Some of the smaller companies that are more nimble, you can call them. There was a particular piece of technology that we needed for a very specific application about a decade ago. And it was a control technology. And we called this small company out here on the West Coast and asked them if they could do what we needed. And here's the problem: we need it in 3 weeks, and we need 300 of them. And they went, sure. Didn't bat an eye. Didn't skip a beat, nothing. And they delivered exactly what we needed. It worked perfectly on time. And so we find a lot of times, if you find a younger, hungry company that can still do what you need them to do, obviously, and make it robust and reliable and all that stuff, then they tend to jump in quicker.
Right. And I imagine you must have a lot of wizards within the company too who are able to make things work as well.
Oh yeah, there is one of my colleagues that whenever I talk to him, I walk away either feeling much smarter or much dumber because he just knows so much. And sometimes it's intimidating, but other times it's really just you just sit there and just soak up new knowledge. It's great.
So considering the differences and the challenges that you experienced when you're designing for the parks, can you sort of walk us through, I dare I say, a typical nighttime spectacular tech process? I mean, we can, pick a nighttime show and just sort of go through what is it, how does that work from conception to opening night?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it starts probably much further out than many people think. For a large nighttime spectacular, we start about 5 years in advance. And that's mostly because it gives you time to, without getting into details, it gives you time to get all the ducks in the row and get the approvals that you need and really start down the road of making a spectacular. So obviously, someone comes up with the creative, and then a lot of us will start talking. There's usually a rough pitch that's assembled. The show gets greenlit, and then we go into development. And in development, the team grows to be a bit bigger, and all the team members are who you would suspect. It's any sort of creative / production team. All of those people are there. I think probably the only difference is that we have a significant show control piece, because our safety interlocks and things of that nature are extremely important, and the robustness and the reliability of the equipment that we're looking for is fairly extreme, right? If you're doing a Broadway show, you're doing 8 shows a week. There are some performances that we do 8 times a day. And so the technology and the scenery and the everything else has to be designed and built to be able to support that type of a duty cycle, right? So that process takes a while to get through development. All the individual designers are working in their crafts, and then we get to a gate where we present the show again as a more refined, finished pitch. There may be a scratch track, a demo track. There's probably a lot more advanced art. The story is a little bit or a lot sometimes more tight. And
is that
then,
like an animatic, or how is it presented in that way?
It can be, yeah. It sort of depends on the project. I've worked on some where it's storyboards. I've worked on some where it's animatics. I've worked on others where we go where it's more than an animatic. We go into something like D3 or something, and you create the environment and really flesh out maybe one scene of the show and really show what that could be. So some of it just depends. Some of it is dependent upon your timing, obviously. And then others, it's dependent upon what we think those who are in the position to approve the show and to go down the road really need to see. There's some people that are great with a verbal description. Some people need art. Some people have to see, beat by beat, everything. And so it's really at that point that everybody sort of, in some ways, goes off on their own to pursue all of their individual crafts. And it's not that there isn't any communication between them, obviously, because so many of us are interconnected, especially lighting and video these days, that you're developing ideas together. You're working with the technical director, trying to figure out where technology is going to fit and what has to be built to mask it. And, the art directors are always concerned about, not seeing the speakers, and the show directors are concerned about the story. And we're also concerned about, not really seeing a lot of the technology. It's a little bit more magic when it's invisible, right? You look at something like Fantasmic here on the West Coast, and the show sort of pops out of nowhere. And there's, that's its own little bit of magic. So that process, can take probably 18 months to 2 years, depending on the size of the show. It's really when everything starts to come together is when we get all in the space together. And one of the things that we've experimented with over the last few years is 2 different approaches. The one approach is essentially, video will come in almost, let's say, 85% complete. And, audio comes in about the same. Lighting comes in 50 to 60 because we're sort of dependent on what we see videos doing, et cetera, et cetera. And the show is assembled, and the time that you're out on site, when the park is closed, overnight, in the middle of the night, in the cold, is kept to a minimum. We love that approach. There are other times when the nature of the show creative is that we really all have to be out there building together. That's obviously a much longer process because you're building in real time, and we're, especially with something like video, where we're manipulating in real time on the actual surfaces, a 30-minute show. That's not something that happens in a week. So that can be a much longer production process. For Fantasmic, the most recent version of Fantasmic, we were out, I think it was 16 weeks of overnight. And that's everything. That's not just tech. Everybody hears a tech quote unquote week lasting 16 weeks and they lose their minds. It's stunt rehearsals, it's tech rehearsals, it's talent rehearsals, it's choreography, it's blocking, it's all of that. We had about 6 dedicated weeks to get all of our elements nailed down. And then we went into regular rehearsals and then just like normal into dress rehearsals and into previews. And we still continue tweaking. The one of the things that I love about working at the parks is we really take to heart Walt's quote of, as long as there's imagination left in the world, Disneyland will never be complete. And the shows are living, breathing things. And we get to alter them and we get to change them and new ideas pop up. And even if we're 3 or 4 days from opening, if somebody has an idea that pops up and all of us go, ooh, yes, that works, then everybody scrambles to incorporate that last minute new idea. So it's a lot of people, and some of us are working from all the corners of the globe, which really affects your creative process. I think that was probably more difficult 2 years ago than it is now, obviously, since everyone is used to being in the screen world. We will occasionally use something like any of the previs opportunities that are available to us. On Phantasmic specifically, we used a visualizer available through one of our higher end lighting consoles because we had to work out some specific elements regarding tracking moving watercraft with about 45 moving lights using interpolated data from show control, going through another control protocol in the lighting desk. And so we previs that first and then implemented it in real life. But most of our work truly is done on site with everybody in front of us. We don't do as much previs as you think we would do.
Interesting.
Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer.
That's
very
great.
articulate.
That's great.
I'm just surprised I remember.
Right. So if you're out there doing these overnights for 6 weeks, what suggestions can you give to young designers about how to have a good work-life balance when your work schedule can be so radically different than everyone else's?
Well, Ellen, as soon as I figure that out, I will be happy. No, it's, you have to, I think all of us in this industry learn at some point that you may be time shifting your holidays and your family time together, and that New Year's Eve doesn't necessarily have to fall on New Year's Eve. It can be March 3rd for no reason other than the fact that you're working on New Year's Eve. And I think what it comes down to is that, luckily when we're in our overnight sessions, the park is only closed, a certain number of hours, and there are other things that have to happen. So even though we're out there for a very long period of time, in weeks, the nighttime that we're able to actually get work done is considerably less than 8 hours. So you try to be there only when you absolutely have to be. During production, obviously you can't just turn off your phone and walk away. So you have to be available. But I think it's really, really important for a designer of any age to realize that it is their job and their job only to look out for their physical health and their mental health and their time. And you do have to protect your time because otherwise it is going to get stolen from you deep in production like that. And so there are a couple of tricks that I will use. I'm a big proponent of blocking out time on my calendar that our executive assistant can see as do not disturb. And I quite frankly, during that 3 or 4 hours have no qualms about turning off my phone and doing something, whether that's sleeping, whether it's dedicating time to updating drawings or documentation, or thinking creatively about what I want to do the next night. It is all part of bringing what you have to the table. And if you're not protecting your time and if you're not protecting that balance, then you're showing up stressed and tired and burnt. And that doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do the show any good. And And I understand that that's really easy to say when you're working in a theater rock and roll environment that takes place under a corporation and when you're not freelance. That adds a whole other layer because, you're looking for your next gig and all of that. So what I could say is really take it upon yourself to own your time and to protect your time. If you want to give away 5 or 6 hours a day to something or someone else, that's great. But you sort of lose the right to complain that you're tired when you show up to rehearsal that night.
No, I think that's excellent advice for any job.
Well, let me ask you a question. At first I thought this would be a question directed at Disney, but I think maybe it's a question directed at you. How do you solve the limitations or the technical problems you run into there? I mean, it can't just be throwing money at it. There must be another angle.
You
to
stole
problem
my
solving.
answer. My answer was going to be piles and piles of money, which is a myth, right? Everybody thinks we've got just like truckloads of cash, but when I talk to high school students, I was like, just like you guys, we have a budget. And we have to stick to the budget. We've agreed. And, part of this is, it's your responsibility. It's what you've said you're going to spend. The other part is, I'm a stockholder. I would like for us to make a profit. So, it's a serious fiduciary responsibility to stay as close as you can to what you said you were going to spend. So the solution isn't piles of money. The solution is to really open yourself up to thinking differently and considering approaches and technology that some people actually just might laugh at you for doing. There are a number of times that I have specified gear and you will get questions, and the questions are, why would you? It may be gear that is maybe a piece of gear that is perceived to be cheap or inferior, and I will get questions about why would you spec something like that? And it's like, well, because it does what we need to do in the time that we need to do it in the conditions that we need to do it, and this is the amount of money that we have. There are these factors. When it comes to unusual things that we're asked to do, I can cite actually two specific examples. A couple of years ago in 2019, we did a Halloween immersive walkthrough experience called Villains Grove in Disney California Adventure. And everything that we wanted to do was coming back pricier than what we wanted to spend. There was this idea that the finale scene would have essentially branches that appeared to be hanging off of these trees that morphed into chandeliers and had twinkling candles in them. And we went to a few different manufacturers, fabricators, out here in Southern California. And we had, drawings of what we wanted. And they came back ridiculous, just like absolutely ridiculous. And so my assistant designer and I went out I think it was a weekend, and picked up a bunch of stuff from floral supply places, fake branches and everything. He took them home to his garage. He got City Theatrical, the flicker candles. He did some wiring. We did some weatherproofing. He did some painting. And on Monday we had a mock-up, and it cost us, it was like $175 each. And so we went into the production meeting on Monday and said, we think this is the finale effect. And the show director just absolutely lost his mind. He loved it. It's exactly what we had all talked about. But all of us were going down the pathway of, we need to hire a fabricator, and we need to provide drawings, and we need to do this. And we were following our process as opposed to going, what does this really need to be, right? It's low voltage, it's outdoors. It's in a fairly protected area. So in looking at that and being able to go, you know what, let's just try to do something and see if it works. We, handed it over to, far more artistic craftsmen than we were to be able to do the final product, but we were able to do it all internally for probably, I'm guessing, 90% less cost. And I mean, that's just one example where you're just tasked to look at things a little bit differently and think, why do we have to follow a process to do this? Why can't we just be, take almost a small local theater approach and go, well, heck, let's just go make something and see if it works. So we're absolutely not, above doing any of, or taking that type of approach in any of these situations.
Well, as a fellow stockholder, I'd like to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I mean, that story
hilarious.
really resonates with me. You know, my older son, who's 12, and I are friends with Rolly Crump, the old time Imagineer.
Oh, yeah. Love Rolly.
And all of his stories are like, well, they said, I don't want to do that, so you have to do that. Or we don't have time to do that, so you learn how to do that. So there's a lot of that in the DNA, I think, too, that inventiveness and that those can often lead to breakthroughs in design and breakthroughs in technology, because you have people who are just trying to figure out how to make this work, and they're not weighed down by the limitations of how much it has to cost, or, how many people need to be responsible for this, or, the labor or whatever. And you're able to create these beautiful things and these wonderful effects that when you sort of look behind the curtain, you see it's like held together by, well, not really held together by like gum and toothpicks, but that essentially, in the DNA of it, it was just like a bunch of guys on a weekend, just like Disneyland itself. Well, Walt and Herb Ryman sat down, and 2 days later they had the master plan for Disneyland.
Right? Well, and I think a lot of what unites a lot of us in this industry is an almost insatiable curiosity. Whether it's on the technical side of like, how does this work? I need to drill down, and I need to take this. I was taking stuff apart, all radios and turntables and everything as a kid, trying to figure out how things worked. And much to the horror of my parents, who would come into my room and discover my birthday presents taken apart. But I think that curiosity of how do we do this, and there's also something about being told that either you can't do it, or the way you want to do it is too expensive or cost prohibitive or it takes too much time. There's a little bit of, oh, really? I'll show you in my garage over the weekend.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of like how do these things work, I'm specifically wondering, when you have a show like The World of Color, where the lighting and the video are so incredibly tightly integrated, not to mention the 1,200 or so fountains that have to do their magic as well on a nightly basis. Like, who is it? Who does what to make all that look like one single thing? How does that work?
Well, luckily, the bunch of us who have been doing those types of things have been doing it for a while now, and we've also been working together for a while now. So you develop a little bit of a shorthand, and so how things typically are laid out is there's a lighting designer assigned to the project, there's a video designer, there's a fountain designer. All three of those designers are either at consoles or have programmers at consoles. With something like World of Color, they are the fountains and the lighting and the video are all programmed / triggered by lighting consoles. They ride on a backbone of show control, which provides for all the interlocks and everything, but all the programming is done on lighting consoles. And so once that happened, once that sort of, back when convergence was the buzzword and was a thing, the lighting, the hardcore lighting designer in me said, well, if I'm controlling it, then and it's bright and it's affecting what I'm doing, then I want to have a voice at the table and a significant voice. And so that led to some conversation about who the tiebreaker was. Essentially, our art director is responsible for video, our show director is responsible for video. Is it a dedicated video designer? Is it a dedicated lighting designer? Is it a lighting and video designer? So we've worked through those questions over the years, and it has really come down to it depends on the project. Because we're lucky enough that all of us as my staff and myself as lighting designers all have video backgrounds as well. Not on the technical side necessarily, but on the creative side. So a lot of smaller projects will take on doing some of that for video, but mostly what it takes is somebody in the steering wheel. Sometimes that's a show director, sometimes it's a creative director who has just a really specific idea about what they're looking for, inversely or not, because there are some times when you get out there and you try something that's been in your head for 18 months and you look at it and it doesn't look as good or doesn't look right or whatever. And so that's the opportunity for playtime, really. It's the number of questions that come over your shoulder of what can you do in this scene? And you just sit there with your programmer and you start playing, and you're just like, well, we've got this and we've got this, or we could do this, and then the lights could duck down, and the video could happen, and then pyro could happen. But it really is collaborative. A lot of times, I'll go back to using the most recent version of Phantasmic as an example. The pyro designer, we're all sitting out there, and we're lucky enough to have climate controlled programming trailers that sit out there in the middle of the night. So in this trailer is usually the producer or production manager, the creative director and show director, the video compositor, the fountain programmer, lighting designer programmer, sometimes the assistant lighting designer, the laser designer, and the pyro designer.
That's quite a crew.
How big is that trailer?
It's a big trailer.
That is quite a crew. And the thing is, we're all we're all strongly opinionated, and we all have an idea, and that's a thing, right? You're not paid for one idea. You're paid for your brain and coming up with 100 ideas. So if something doesn't work, going back and trying the next thing is really important to be able to do. So, sometimes you'll start down a path and everybody's doing their cues, and we'll work for an hour or so independently, and it looks like a complete mess. And then we'll go, okay, let's run it with timecode. And we'll run it with timecode, and it either continues to look like a complete mess, or it starts to look like the shape of something. And it's usually at that point where we go, okay, well, lasers, why don't you pull back a little bit? Or the creative director will say, fountains, this really needs to be about you because of this piece in the music. And we find that's a lot of what really drives us, is everybody listening to the music trying to capitalize on moments, whether it's a piano run, it's a cymbal crash, it's a glissando of chimes, where you're really trying to add your bit of sparkle or magic or whatever, and you throw it out there. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, and you have to have enough of or as a little of an ego to go, yeah, you know what, that really doesn't work. I'm out. I'm just gonna sit out this cue and you guys take it. Or be able to defend. No, I think this should really be about this moment because of, this happens, then this happens, and then boom, I can do a huge lighting look there that, maybe has video as support or has a little bit of pyro. But to be able to sort of defend your position, not in a, obviously argumentative, awful defensive way, but in a no, I think this really capitalizes on this moment better than some of the other options.
Are there differences in the collaborative environment in the U.S. versus collaborating at the theme parks in Europe or Asia?
Aside from the obvious one of distance and teleconferencing, not really. It's a little bit slower in Asia because you're typically reliant upon translators, and that you always have to be careful and obviously choose your words carefully and be very specific about an idea that you're trying to get across, especially when it involves something like safety. Luckily the folks that are staffed in the Asian parks and the European parks, are experts in their own right as well. So I think one of the more fascinating things that has come out of the collaborations with the other parks is that they are, they're really putting more of their own cultural stamp on what we're doing. And that's what we have to rely on them for, right? We can bring all the Disney magic in the world, but if it doesn't resonate with the guests in that particular country, then all of our work is sort of useless. Why? So really, getting their perspective. I mean, you look at the differences, say, between Mystic Manor, which is Hong Kong's version of the Haunted Mansion, and the Disneyland Paris version of the Haunted Mansion, and Anaheim's version, and all three, are the Haunted Mansion, but they're very different stories, because each of those cultures has a different relationship with the dead than we do. And so you have to take that into account from the beginning when you're creating either an attraction or a show. But as far as the actual collaborating, working with other people, the players, the titles are virtually the same all across the board. And everybody brings, I like the international perspective. Everybody brings just sort of a different way of thinking to the table that makes those sorts of projects really fascinating.
And you sort of have an American colleague in Paris with Tracy Eck, so that helps, right?
Yes, we do. Well, and our director, the director of production now, is an export from Anaheim in Paris. Yeah, so that's we've got a couple of producers that actually came from Florida that are now in Paris as well. So
cool.
So it's and that's the other opportunity, right? Is if you decide you want to go off and if you want to be an expat and live in France for a while, there are potential opportunities to transfer to other parks, which could be fun.
Yes, it could be great fun.
Okay, I want to circle back to that trailer. And can you discuss a little bit about that LD programmer relationship that's evolved over the last 20 years? I mean, that's gone from just do what I'm telling you to do to partner.
Okay. Yes, and I think it's as far as I'm concerned, it's the single best thing to happen in the last 20 years, because I was a programmer a very long time ago, and I hated. Quite frankly, I hated being data entry. I hated Channel 1 at 30. And so one of the things that we have really tried to do at Disneyland specifically is create mentorship between designers and programmers. We have a number of programmers who want to design. We have a number of programmers that we are blessed with who are never happier than when they're sitting behind a console. And that is what they want to do. And they have dedicated every single part of their brain to diving so deep into consoles today. And if you look at consoles today versus, 20 years ago, there is, first of all, I think personally, it would be difficult for me as a designer to keep up with every single change in every single platform that happens as quickly as it does these days. But the other thing is as a designer, I feel really strongly that my eyes need to be on the stage and my ears need to be tuned to a stage manager or a show director or a producer. And so that puts me in 4 different places already. I don't want to add a 5th having to deal with a lighting console. So we really embraced the idea of programmer as collaborator. As essentially primary collaborator. There are a number of times, all the shows we do, there are still, it's like 101 through 110 in X-ray position in open white, and that's where we're going to start, time 3. And that's what they'll do. There are a number of other times where there's something else going on that I need to divert my attention to, that I say, okay, this is under the sea. We need to start in green. There needs to be some blue. It needs a little zh, and then we need a way to get out of it. And I'll go away and deal with whatever it is I'm dealing with, and I'll come back, and the programmer will have 3 or 4 things to show me. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? So it's really good that work can continue when I'm off either talking to a director, a stage manager, or something else. And it also helps build their skills as well, and they get to contribute. They begin to take ownership in the show because there's something in it that really has their fingerprints on it. And I think that's just tremendously important. Growing the next generation of programmers and designers is something that we're really invested in Anaheim.
That's excellent.
So this is a tragedy that this podcast people can't see you. My question is, can you design lights without moving your hands?
Oh God, no.
when you did the description of Under the Sea, there's like a story being told there.
Right.
I am. Yes. If you made me sit on my hands, I would cease to be able to speak, I think. Because and it's a huge part, right? When you've got, especially when you've got moving lights, and it's a shame nobody at home can see this, but it's like, I need them to do this, or I need them to peel away. It's all that sort of stuff that, if you chopped off my fingers, I wouldn't be able to design. Well, literally, but figuratively as well. I wouldn't be able to tell anyone what I was looking for.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Our next question is, do you have any thoughts or advice for young designers who are interested in breaking into the theme park industry?
Yes. Okay. So first of all, like we were talking about earlier, be curious. Absolutely. That is the number one qualification. Be curious, and be curious about everything. Be curious outside your craft. Everyone knows our basic job as lighting designers is to see the actors and to render the costumes and the scenic and everything else on stage appropriately, right? To whatever the director is asking us to do. But beyond that, the more you know about costuming, the more you know about fabric, the more you know about scenic design, the more you know about paint, the more you know about how surfaces reflect light, the more you know about video, the more you know about projection, the more you know about show control, IT, network. Please learn something about networking. And not just, between designers at Circle Bar, but networking as it comes to data transmission across a network. I would honestly say the other thing is to, you don't have to be necessarily a fan of theme parks to work in the environment, but it certainly helps because it's a different way of thinking about things. Most of our shows are designed. We always think about them sort of as 360 productions, right? Because especially something like World of Color, Fantasmic is like 270-degree viewing angle. A lot of our shows are out in the middle of a crowd, so that's something that that once you immerse yourself in the environment becomes easier to do, and the more you're familiar with the parks, whatever it is, whether it's Cedar Fair, Disney, Six Flags, whatever. Getting immersed in those environments and learning what works well and what works doesn't, because there are some, just like in any field, there are some tried and true tricks that you can use, and there are other things that you always want to steer clear of because they typically just don't work. But then the other thing is, and this is more broadly, have something else that you like doing, that you're passionate about, whether that's something like Tom Daly loves knitting while he's not being a world-class Olympic champion diver, right? So it's like, okay, so have something else that you can focus on when you're not working. Ideally, hopefully it's something that also feeds your creativity and your creative soul. But if it doesn't, if it's something you just like working on cars in your spare time, then do that too, right? Just be interested, engaged, and curious.
That's a great answer.
So, Ellen, you have our final question.
I do. You told us where your eyes should be and where your ears should be, but you didn't talk about the other thing you've got your nose into. Can you tell us a little about your side hustle?
I'm one of those people that believes in the side hustle, right? So a couple of years ago, 2018, I want to say, my husband and I decided to start a candle company on a whim. Basically because we buy a crap ton of them. So we're like, we would save a bunch of money if we just made our own. And then we realized, hey, we could actually sell these. And it initially really did start out as us planning for retirement. We don't know that we want to retire here in California. So we thought, okay, this is something we could do anywhere. We wanted something we could do together. We wanted something we could do at home. And we looked around at a bunch of different things and we thought, oh, we could do this. So we started with a Halloween collection 3 years ago. And It was going really fine until the pandemic. And in the pandemic, it just exploded. And because people were staying home, right?
Yeah.
So they're staying home, they're on Zoom all day. We found it, there were probably 3 or 4 times during 2020 that we found it very, very difficult to keep up with all the orders we were getting. And, again, it's just the 2 of us. And I was sort of sidelined for a bit with a health scare. And so he's doing virtually everything. So it's funny because earlier today, I'm actually shooting photos for the Halloween collection, which launches this weekend. So I'm like, where are you going? I'm like, I have a podcast to do. I'll be back. But yeah, it started as just kind of a fun side gig. And now it's become this thing. So and the thing is, we love doing it. It's awesome. And the house smells amazing while we're doing it.
Can you tell us some of the stranger flavors?
Okay, so it started. Okay, so I'm old, right? So we were goths back when goths were a new thing. We were actually more gothic than goth, really. You might be able to. Is the skull still behind me? Yes, you guys can see the skull. You guys.
Oh yes.
Home.
Oh yeah.
I'm never too far away from a skull.
And you are wearing black.
And I'm almost always. So we the first batch we came up with was ruin, seance, and funeral pyre. Because why don't you want your home to smell like a funeral pyre, right? Let's see. Halloween is Vampire's Lair, Witch's Spell, and Poison Apple. We do a special one for Christmas that we call Dark Noel, which is actually one of our biggest sellers. So we sort of specialize in darker, some might say more masculine, but they're like more saturated, they're earthy. So we just have a lot of fun doing them and making up we work together on making up the names, but I do all the graphics and photography and everything. And it's just a fun, different creative outlet that still allows me to do another thing that I love, which is graphic work and Photoshop and all of that. But just channel it in a different direction.
Well, that's great. I love that you do that.
Yeah. Where can people get these candles?
Right. We only have 85 days.
Oh my gosh. I get to do a plug, right? Okay. So if you, it's etsy.com/shop/Apotheca Candle Co. Thank you guys for letting me make a plug. I appreciate it.
well, thank you for spending your afternoon with us. This has been absolutely great. I really appreciate it. We all do.
I've had such an awesome time.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Ellen, why don't you take us out?
Great. The rocking sounds of the Luminoids tell us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every podcast site out there. Check our website at lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a single second of our Light Talk shenanigans.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Flecht, Flocht, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers and Sista, coming to you from St. Bart's, Washington, D.C., and the Lone Star State.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
We'll see you again next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles there.
Thank you.